So I'm going to read an excerpt from the book. It comes from sort of the beginning of the book, and it takes place in the modern story as opposed to the Victorian story. And Galen has just had a really bad night. And he's discovered that these diaries of the mad Dr. Handley have been found at the Bedlam renovation site. Galen awoke to the smell of freshly ground coffee. At least he'd somehow remembered to set the machine to auto-grind, better than a fucking alarm clock. One eye, then the other, opened into the too bright sunshine leaking through the blinds, reflecting directly into his bleary vision. Bloody hell! He winced at the entropy of papers, folders, books, and electronic paraphernalia sprawled across the floor. When had he done that? Clearly it had not been one of his better nights. At least he'd slept well, a rare enough commodity. No flashbacks, no nightmares, no dreams at all. The first time in 4 days since the Guardian piece. Thank you, God of tetrahydrocannabinol. Galen's joints cracked with the release of tension as he unwound his limbs from the sofa, yawning his way through the mess. Coffee. Strong, black coffee. Dark roast, thick and rich. No sugar, no milk. He set his mug in place and pressed brew. The fizz-pop of the machine and the aroma of Sumatra Reserve absorbed the thundering in his head. He stepped into the shower and let the hot liquid, sharp as needles, cascade through the knots in his shoulders and arms until the headache splintered into insignificance. He could easily spend the morning here until the water ran cold, but he had a business to run. He retrieved the steaming mug, glancing at the empty Lagavulin bottle with regret, and headed into the shop. Simon was right. It was ridiculous to think that the pharmaceutical company would make a connection to him by studying insane asylum diaries of an insane doctor. His thoughts drifted to the Ouroboros book. Was it really possible that Simon had located it after all these years? That book had caused nothing but grief for him, for Simon, even for Simon's poor dead wife, who but for the elixir would be long at her best, along with her husband. For all his interest in antiquarian books, for all his buying and selling of texts nearly as opaque and fascinating as the Ouroboros book, all his searching for it, part of him recoiled from the very idea of seeing it again. He opened the blinds, dusted the shelves, and opened the shop. Any occupation to distract his thoughts from the book, from Handley's diaries, from... A quicksilver flicker of memory slithered through his mind. His toes curled instinctively as it took hold, and he told himself it wasn't real, even as invisible flames penetrated the thin leather of his sandals. Exquisite agony burned into his soul, unbound, blistered, and festering. He was held down, shackled, impotent to stop it. The doorbells jangled, and the vision was gone. Good morning, he breathed shakily, forcing a smile. He nodded to the young woman perusing jars of tea on a low shelf. They are all dried in-house, fresh each week. Select what you fancy, and I can bundle them in silk sachets for you, or if you like. Bulk is nice, too. I can bundle them. I've a good selection of infusers, and... He hoped she would take it in bulk and not certain his trembling hands could manage the dexterity needed for the sachet ribbon. She paused at a large inset bookcase, removing an 18th century volume, Antipodean Art and Artists. Are you all right, Mr. Erceldoon? Galen blinked. Mrs. Frayne. Of course. Where was his mind this morning? The glare. He'd not seen her for the glare. That must be it. Either that or he was finally losing what remained of his sanity. Yes, love, of course, he said too quickly. A late night. He winked as he managed a knowing grin. I've your order right here. He fetched a brown bag from beneath the counter. Tangerine spice tea, 3 ounces. Perhaps you'd like a cup now. Kettle's hot. Is this a first printing? "It isn't that, Mrs. Frayne. The plates are in perfect condition." "My husband's birthday is Sunday." "The art history professor, of course." "It's a handsome gift, if a bit pricey, but for you, love, $300. She didn't flinch. "Can you put it aside for me? I'll pick it up tonight while Charles is teaching." "Of course." "Sure you wouldn't want to stay and I've another book, even better, upstairs." She paid for her tea and the book, turning to leave. How might he delay her departure at least for a bit? The vision had vanished when she entered, and he'd rather not be sucked into it again, as long as he was not alone. "Sorry, Mr. Erceldoune, class in half an hour, and I need to finish grading way too many exams before my students descend and demand their inflated A's. You sure you're okay?" "Yeah, fine. Let me know how you like the tea." By noon, the two vivid flashes of memory had yet to retreat. An endless horror movie in short cuts that would have chased Guillermo del Toro under the bed, trembling with terror. A new vision materialized, this time a flail slicing into his arms, his legs. Horrified, Galen observed as his skin peeled away, then muscle, then sinew, flowered open, revealing the white of bone before it, too, broke away to expose the black gelatin of his marrow. He heard a scream, not knowing whether it was memory or imagination or real. "Oh, for Christ's sakes, Galen, get a grip. No one will come for you. Don't be such a fucking twit. Who would care now about a man, no matter the overblown claims about him, hanged in Newgate nearly 2 centuries ago? A walk. He needed a walk. The fresh, clean, cold air courtesy of yesterday's snowfall. Galen flipped the sign in the window to closed and stepped into the midday throng of Northwestern students, surprised to feel the warmth of the sun as if yesterday's freak blizzard had been a momentary meteorological memory lapse. The remains of snowdrifts had melted into puddles and slush. Water dripped from the L tracks. A train clattered overhead, leaving in its wake a wall of mist and steam, embedded with rainbows of bent sunlight dangling mid-air. Galen reached out as if he might capture one in his hand. Sandaled college students hurled dripping snowballs at each other like late-season skiers in sleeveless tank tops, enjoying the paradoxes of a Chicago spring. He barely noticed them, blurs in a post-impressionist painting, as he wended his way through puddles, skateboarders, and bicycles. He needed to drown the visions, the screams, the memories from his mind. For that he knew the perfect place, a secluded patch of rock and sand up the shore near Simon's house. He'd spotted it a year or two ago beneath a high bluff as he'd hiked along the beach, not realizing how far north he'd ventured, surprised to spot Simon's promontory, 100 feet above him and 10 miles from home. There he could lose himself in the crash of the waves upon the rocks, and dive into the bracing chill of Lake Michigan in spring. He fetched his Triumph sport bike from its parking space and took off north along Sheridan. The alabaster gleam of the Baha'i Temple loomed to his left as he rounded a turn, the shoreline snaking westward. He stopped the bike, picturing the temple's gardens edged with snow as surely they would be. Maybe he'd end the ride here, lose himself in the great 7-sided hall, surrounded by centuries of wisdom echoing with each footstep. Expansive is the building itself. Galen aborted the idea as a school bus pulled up to the building. A tour. Damn. What if he lost it right there in the middle of all those kids? Bad idea. The terrain changed dramatically, and now he rode high above the lake, through bluffs that wound into blind curved, steep, rocky ravines on either side. He could hear the wind-whipped waves crashing 60, 80 feet below into the base of the cliff. Stopping at the top of a bluff, he looked down, watching the last vestiges of snow clinging to the boulders, melting into waterfalls and cascading down to the beach below. Galen dismounted the bike and picked his way through trees and rocks, descending a forested embankment, thinking better of it when he lost his footing on the ice, one sandal slipping from his foot. He'd have to bike it. Carefully he climbed through brush and loose boulders and back onto the Triumph. He started it up again and put it in gear, about to make a turn down the narrow dirt road to the beach. Startled by a sound close by, Galen turned, and then he saw it. A hand, disembodied and wielding a jagged knife, its metal gleam blinding him. Bloody hell. Spooked, he slammed on the foot brake just as the bike began to roll down the sharp incline, skidding badly on an icy patch. And then he was in free fall, no longer on the bike. The sudden exhilaration of flight was soon replaced by the realization he was plummeting down the embankment, rock and ice sharp as daggers. Sliced through his clothing as he tried reaching out with his good hand to gain purchase on the slippery outcropping or grab on to a tree branch. The Triumph followed, hurtling through the bluff, hitting it not 5 feet above him, bursting into flames, shrapnel raining down on him as he continued to descend the steep rock. The pounding of his heart thundered in his ears and melted into the crackle of flames and the roar of the waves as he plunged the rest of the way to the boulder breakwater below. An echo from high above floated just beyond his ability to protest. Someone call 911. It has been so much fun exploring the world of Galen Erseldune and Simon Bell, and so much so that I'm already working on book 2. So I know that you'll enjoy exploring it as much as I have. I hope you do. And you can find Apothecary's Curse wherever books are sold, brick and mortar, online. It's everywhere, libraries. And I hope you enjoy it.